New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. I am so glad that we are hanging out for just a few minutes today together. This is the Inclusive Church, where every week we get together at noon Mountain Time and get a little reminder about what it means to be inclusive in New Thought spiritual communities, get some ideas of what we can do to make sure that we are inclusive and that we are inviting others to be inclusive as well, and to just recommit to have the kinds of conversations we need to think about the challenges. Well, we don't have to think about the challenges, to navigate the challenges that we find ourselves in as a result of being inclusive, and to think about how we can be an example of the love of spirit in a world that is multi-ethnic, multiracial, and multi-generational. So what are we talking about today? Often I find myself in conversations with people about what's going on in the world and how we can, in our churches, take a stand that is in alignment with our values, our spiritual principles, and our commitments. And there are a couple of things going on that during the past week and then today, with today actually being Veterans Day in the U.S. Already today, I've been in a few conversations where that have been very interesting. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. That's what I'm going to talk about. And I would love for you to be in the conversation. So say hello in the chat or in the comment section, depending on which platform you're on. And as we go through the next 30 minutes or so, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you have a suggestion, if you have an opinion, please feel free to put it into the chat. So let's start with Veterans Day, just because I think that's the shorter part of this conversation today. It is Veterans Day in the U.S. It is a day to honor those who have served in any of the military branches. And if any of you who are watching or listening have served in the U.S. military, then I want to say thank you. I'm so grateful for your service. And one of the conversations I was in this morning was with someone who said they, 2 days ago, which was a Sunday, that they have been in a conversation with 2 or 3 people at their church, and Veterans Day, they were talking about the fact that Veterans Day was not even mentioned as something important coming up this week, and that they were disappointed and they felt unseen. And so often when people talk about diversity and inclusion, it's easy, or it's top of mind, to talk about race and gender. And in this day and age, sexual orientation or gender identity, those 3 come up all the time. And then in fourth place, in terms of the top 5 or 6 things that come up, there would be the focus on political polarity, because many of our spiritual communities have been challenged by the political polarity, and somehow it's gotten into this conversation about this conversation related to diversity and inclusion. So it made me think this morning when I was in that conversation about, with all of the ways that we are different from one another, in any church, we are not going to remember every single identity group every week or every month. We're not. And I think it would be an unrealistic expectation to assume that we could. So I want to say that, and then I also want to say it's a both and, that it is interesting. I know in some of the communities where I speak on a regular basis, as well as in my home community, I know for a fact that there are many, many, many people and that who are veterans, and so it could be really interesting to have that conversation in your community, and then adapt your behavior in whatever way, adapt the behavior in your church in whatever way you need to or want to. Because there's not a definite one right way or one wrong way. And it's not, oh, you did a good job and you get a check mark if you mention Veterans Day, and you did a bad job and you get an X mark if you didn't. It's not that simple. And I think that's part of what is really frustrating in many communities that are committed to being inclusive, because many people want a script, right? They want to know it's either this or that, it's right or wrong. If I do this, everything's going to be okay. And I think that's one of the reasons this topic is so important, and why we have to talk about it often. And we need to talk about it in the context of, or with, the people we are in community with, to understand exactly what are the priorities, what are the issues and the opportunities that people in my community are excited about, or are interested in, or are compelled to engage in. So, so Veterans Day, yes, thank you if you are a veteran. I'm so grateful for people who I personally know who have served in the military, and it means a lot. It means a lot all over the world, for those who are willing to risk their own lives and to commit their lives to service for their fellow citizens. Also in the US, we are in week 5 plus, right at the edge of week 6 of a U.S. government shutdown, and I've been in a number of conversations because just like the conversation even a week ago in the US, there were elections. And so, whenever there are elections, whenever there's anything happening that is a big focus for the governmental system, the tension rises, right? There's an increase in tension about, well, do we talk about that? Do we not talk about that? How do we talk about it? How do we not talk about it? And so, in today's episode of the Inclusive Church, I don't have all the answers for you, but I have some things for you to think about. It is a Toolkit Tuesday, since, as you can see, I don't have a featured guest. And those weeks when I have a featured guest, we go almost a full hour and go a little bit more deeply into whatever topic. But when it's just me, I try to keep it to about 30 minutes, a little less, a little more, so that you get a little gift of time in your day. So, the US government shutdown, oh my goodness. Now, the way that most people have been talking about it, it has been from a framework or a context of who's right and who's wrong, who's good, who's bad. And that has led to a lot of the conversations being around, are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? Or the Democrats are blocking the progress. No, the Republicans are. And I'm not saying I don't have a personal opinion about that. But I think in the conversations that I want to have, because I want to come from spiritual principle, I'm not looking for who's right or who's wrong. I am looking to have the conversation based on, how does my church represent what we teach? How does my church represent what we teach? And if I am going to talk about different people in different leadership roles, whether it is locally, statewide, or nationally, then I want the conversation to be about what elected representatives are speaking about and in their actions representing the spiritual principles that we say are important, are universal, and are our guidance. Now, this is not really any different from how we've talked about being inclusive on really any other topic. And so for me, it strikes me as really important, as an important observation, how often when the topic of politics or government come up, we think we have a different standard, or we think there is a different standard, and we then get frustrated, or we completely run away because we don't know, or we're not comfortable applying the standard of our spiritual principles to the conversation. And so I'm just really curious. There's a number of places where I can have this conversation with people in my spiritual community, and people outside of my spiritual community, people in the world. Because everywhere I go, I take my spiritual principles and spiritual values with me. So I don't want to say I'm only going to have a certain kind of conversation with the people I go to church with. And then with everybody else, it's okay for me to debate, to be ugly, to be accusatory, to point my finger, to blame and or shame. Like, I don't want to do that outside of my church either. But we're having this conversation in the context of in our spiritual communities where we say we are inclusive and we commit to being inclusive. So yes, I'm going to start with, well, let's talk about how we have this conversation as leaders. How do we have this conversation happening in our spiritual communities? Obviously, a lot depends on, what the whoever is providing a talk or leading a class, what is it that they are inserting or including in their talk or in the class, because the US government shutdown is a real life, real world, real time challenge in the US right now. And so, if in fact there are people, and there are people in every spiritual community who have been directly impacted by the government shutdown, maybe they have been furloughed, or maybe they are considered essential and they are required to work every day without receiving pay. There's direct impact there. Maybe there are people in your community, in your church, who they're retired, but all three of their children are directly impacted by the furloughs, or by being essential and needing to work, or by working in an industry that is directly affected by government workers. And so they are impacted financially, they are impacted emotionally, they are impacted mentally, and it is a real deal that is happening. And this is not about whether it's right or wrong. It's about saying, this is what's going on right now. And how does this church support the people who are members of our community who are impacted directly and indirectly, not just theoretically, hypothetically, because they live in this country, but it really is impacting either the economics or the mental and or physical health and affairs of people in the community. So how do you talk about it? How do you talk about it? And as leaders in your church, when you're having that conversation, are you talking about how, if there are ways that your church community can be supporting members of your church who are affected by this? Last week, I was in a conversation with someone, and their assumption was the only way to support, that there were two things. That, of course, our church should be praying for people who are negatively impacted by this state of affairs, and we should take up a collection and then find out who could use the money. And I remember asking them, so that's a really great start. Brainstorm 8 more ways. I want you to have a list of 10 possible things that you can think of before you even go and talk to people and ask them what is it that they need or what kind of support they would desire. And it was quite telling for me that this person could only come up with those 2. And so we talked about that and we brainstormed together a little bit. And it was very interesting because this particular leader was not really excited about asking for input. It was like they felt they needed to have the answer from themselves, from within themselves, but they had never been in a situation like this or that they could think of that was similar. And so we do have to be able to reach out in terms of identifying who we can help, but also how we can help them. In a different conversation, and this was maybe about 3 weeks ago, I was coaching a minister who is in a church that has made a big commitment to being inclusive, and they were really having a hard time because everyone they were talking to just about was in the pointing finger blame mode and were really angry that our elected leaders would let this happen. And it felt like not taking responsibility for all Americans and being very partisan, especially because things that were in the news were pretty much assigning everything to one party or the other, right? And so this is not new for us. I'm sad to say this is not new for us. This is a condition that has not only existed for a long time, but has expanded greatly in recent years. So, as leaders in churches, it's much more important that we are very clear that beyond political party, which is something that has been humanly defined and humanly elevated, that it is our job to elevate what we teach as the spiritual foundation for having a better life, a good life. And that includes caring for people, that includes being equally responsible for the collective as well as the individual experience of life. And then you begin to talk about there are hundreds of ways to contribute to that. And in your community, in your church, deciding what's one thing that we will do, or what are 5 things that we will do, or that we will use our ministry in this way. We will be good stewards of the money we have in that way, and not allow it to be defined by political party. And it's hard to do. It's I understand that it can be really challenging to talk about, but I cannot overemphasize the importance of understanding that, especially in New Thought communities and churches, what we teach is we teach people to think from the causal place that what we choose and what we do, that we are causal. We have the power to create, to co-create with spirit, and to cause environmental change. And so if that is true, and what is happening in the world is happening, it's real, our approach must be that we are representing what spirit has defined or designed the world to be. And our actions are part of the cure for what is happening that we understand to be out of alignment with spiritual law. So I don't know what that means for your church. That's for you to talk with people and to determine that. Do you want to feed the hungry? Do you want to clothe the poor? Do you want to support things that ensure that people have health care? Do you want to house the unsheltered? Do you want to be contributing to those things that create heaven on earth? Or do you want to be silent and allow the loud voices of division and separation to actually create the rhythm and um, the take the attention and create the priority. And it's up to you. It's up to me. It's up to all of us in the churches we are in to determine. But whatever you do, please don't think that by ignoring it, by not speaking to it, that you are contributing to healing, because you're not. You're allowing that which is getting conscious attention to grow and to expand. So please notice in your own conversation and in your own thinking, are you rallying your energy around hatred and violence, whether it's physical violence, verbal violence, or emotional violence? Are you taking sides about the shutdown, about Supreme Court rulings, about immigration, based on political party or based on your spiritual guidance? So I'm going to stop there for today. And I'm just inviting you to be thinking about how all of this applies to you. I want to remind you that it is possible for you to grab this after today or other episodes of the Inclusive Church by going to the Inclusive Church playlist. There's the QR code on the screen. You can take a quick picture of it and hear about or watch a variety of different topics. And if you are interested in prayer, you can join the Treatment Tuesday email list, where you receive a prayer every week. They're not always about inclusion, but they do provide you with with insight spiritually and help you or remind you to realign with your spiritual values. And I will see you again next Tuesday right here on the New Thought Media Network for the next episode of Inclusive Church.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.